We'll be opening, prior to opening the meetings today, we will have a blessing from our Kamatua Tame Pakoia, and then Reverend Stephen Black will do a reading. Thank you, over you, Tame. Thank you.
Tēnā koe Richard, tuatahi ka nui te mihi atu kia koe te koro matua, anuru ngā mema o te kaunihira, mihi ana hoki. Ki taku whānau e pai nei I tēnei wā, koutou Sunny. Big D, tēnei te mihi atu kia koe pai te kete I tō kanohi I roto I tēnei whare hoki. Koutou e hara mai mō ngā kaupapa kānui te mihi atu. Mihi ana hoki ki te minita hou tipene, kānui te mihi atu kia koe I hara mai mo te kauhau I tēnei ata. Nō reira, ko aku kupu tuatai ke hāpai ki te rangi, ki te matuanui te rangi, kia hora tamarino. I waiganui a tātou e pai nei, kia whakapapapau namu te moana. Te hunga ko whetūrangi tia, hoki atu koutou ki Hawaii nui, mai roti I te ariki. Tēnei hoki te tautoko I te mihi ngā rā rangatira o te kīngi e whakarangatira I tāna kotahi rau ono te kau I rungi te tūranga o kīngi tūheitia, kānui te mihi atu. Kā reo e kumero I ngā kōrero engari tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou. E huitahi mō ngā kaupapa o kirikiri roa, tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou. E te atua kaharawa uhi a te korowai o te aroha I rungi a mātou I tēnei rangi, me ngā rā kei te heke mai. Koe nei mātou e whakawhetai kia koe I rungi te ingoa tō mātou kai whakahora. Mo ake ake, āmene. Tēnā koutou. Tipene.
Kia ora mātua. Atamari e, tēnā koutou I ngā kaitiaki o Kirikiri Roa. As you prepare for this day of extraordinary meetings to consider housing in our beautiful city, consider these ancient words from the prophet Isaiah, which I've tweaked just a touch. It's the vision he has of what God wants for us rather than the housing experience that we are experiencing now. Look, I am creating new heavens and a new earth, so wonderful that no one will even think about the old ones anymore. Be glad, rejoice forever in my creation, and look, I will create Kirikiri Roa as a place of happiness. Her people will be a source of joy. I will rejoice in Hamilton and delight in my people, and the sound of weeping and crying will be heard no more. No longer will babies die when only a few days old. No longer will adults die before they have lived a full life. In those days, people will live in the houses they build and eat the fruit of their own vineyards. It will not be like the past, when invaders took the houses and confiscated the vineyards, for my people will live as long as trees and will have time to enjoy their hard-won gains. They will not work in vain, and their children will not be doomed to misfortune. For they are a people blessed by the Lord, and their children too will be blessed. So may you be the council that helps create that place of happiness, where people live in their own houses, where they will not work in vain, and where their children will not be doomed, but blessed. Amen.
Good members, could everyone please remain standing? We'd just like to acknowledge the passing of Tony Steele, a great Hamiltonian. He was the headmaster of Hamilton Boys High School, actually around about when I was there, and he was also an MP in government for many years. So it would just have a minute's silence as we reflect on Tony's life. Thank you. The Deputy Mayor will be representing Council tomorrow at the funeral. So we do have a meeting on tomorrow, the Deputy Mayor will be absent for a part of that meeting while he represents the city. Okay, so we'll declare the extraordinary council meeting open for the Thursday, the 10th of May 2018 at 9:42 a.m. So apologies. Okay, do we have a mover? Councillor Mark, seconded by Councillor Ryan. All those for, any against? Carried. Confirmation of agenda, I'll hand over to the Democracy Manager.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Good morning, everyone. In confirming the agenda this morning, can you please note the following? Debate is proposed for 2 minutes with an extension of 1 minute if required. Attachment 1, HCC's draft submission to the sale and supply of alcohol renewal of licences amendment bill for item 10 has been circulated under separate cover. That item C1, the public excluded item on special housing area application for Rota Kauri North, statement of intent, is to be taken during item 5, which is the open section of that item, to allow council to finalise the statement of intent. That there is a late addition to the agenda under Standing Order 3.5.6, which is an update from the City Solicitor. No decision is required. This update is regarding tomorrow's agenda, and the City Solicitor is not available tomorrow, hence the addition today. Thank you, Mayor Andrew.
Thank you. So we have a mover, Councillor James, seconded by Councillor Leo. All those for, any against? Carried. Declarations of interest. There are no declarations of interest. Public forum, I'll hand over to the Democracy Manager.
Right. We have a few speakers in public forum this morning. Can I start by asking Paul Radich and Aaron Collier from the Perry's Group to come forward? Paul and Aaron are speaking to item 9, which is the Special Housing Area Policy Review Update. Gentlemen, you have 3 minutes in total, including questions. And can I please note that you're to speak to the item on the agenda? Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you and good morning, councillors. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. My name's Paul Radich and I work for Perry Group. I'm joined by Aaron Collier, our planner, who's leading the work for a special housing area. I'd just like to acknowledge the members of Waikato Tainui here and our Mana Whenua group, representing several hapu today, including Ngāti Hawa, Ngāti Mahanga, Turanga Waiwai, Marae, Ngāti Wairere and Tama Unupo. Just some context to start off with. We've been working, or this group has been working with Perry's over the last year through the various processes being undertaken. We originally planned to come in support of those processes, but thought that today would be a good opportunity to come anyway, support the process, observe the process, and give input where appropriate onto this item. I'm conscious of time and that you guys have a lot on this time of the year, so I'll pass it over to Aaron to expand on these points.
Kia ora, good morning, Your Worship, councillors and tangata whenua. So I have been associated with special housing areas since 2014, I'd like to comment on the proposed changes to your policy. I agree that the policy should contain affordability requirements as per the Mayor's memorandum of January, which was sent to Perry's and which Perry's responded to. However, Perry's considered that further changes are required to the policy. It's critically important that the policy ensures that the scheduling process is streamlined to deliver housing. The HCC legislation envisages a process which is designed to avoid some of these RMA type delays and significant processes so as to deliver housing very quickly and very efficiently. The accord for Hamilton was signed back in December of 2016. The SHA policy was confirmed in August of 2017. And on the 2nd of October, Perry's and a number of other applicants applied for their special housing areas. So those applications were lodged 7 months ago. The processing of scheduling, in my view, should be a very simple one, and it should not involve RMA type requests, information required at resource consent stage, or specific peer reviews, technical reporting and such ongoing requests as you would experience under an RMA process. Much of that stuff is actually for the following on HCC consent process that follows on from scheduling. And I'd note that that's particularly so for sites that are already zoned urban. So a number of the HCC sites are already identified as being zoned in an urban sense, so they're appropriate for buildings and services. The policy does need to be more in accordance with the guidance that's provided by the HCC legislation, which is an infrastructure-focused position and evidence of demand. And that's really relating to the facilitation of housing supply. So significant delays must be avoided in this policy, and timeframes need to be included, as does some direction under matters such as PDAs and SOIs, because there's been significant confusion around that. The council needs to adopt more of a template for some of those considerations. The logistical considerations part of the policy is also, in my view, too broad and too all-encompassing. My experience with Tauranga SHAs is that the process has involved a much more streamlined scenario. I was involved in a number of the major significant projects in Tauranga, including the council's own SHA, where that process took no more than 2 months from start to finish. And so within 6 months, houses were being delivered under some of those early SHAs. That shows what can be done under a streamlined process. So I'd ask that the council give some further consideration to taking this into account in reviewing their policy, and that it's not just focused on housing affordability. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to point out that the letter that I sent out earlier and the affordability level that we thought it was at that time may well be lower due to depending on where central government lands on housing affordability. So it may be that that letter will need to be updated depending on what central government comes out with as far as where their affordability level is. So thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you very much, Norm.
Thank you.
No. No.
No. So if I could now ask Norm Hill to come forward. Norm. Thank you. Norm is with the Tangata Whenua Group, and he is also speaking to item 9. Norm, 3 minutes when the bell goes. That's the perhaps we'll do a bell at 2 minutes.
Just apologies to Paul, I called you Norm. So sorry, thank you, Norm.
Kia ora tātou, e tūnei ake hau, e noho nei ake hau ki te tautoko i ngā āhuatanga o tēnei rā. Me mihi ka tika ki tō tātou nei kingi, e noho nei i runga i te ahoro o tapuna mātua tūpuna, a rātou māko whetūrangi tia, moi mai haere atu rā. E tēnei wā, te tuka mihi ki te whare nei, kia ngā whakamua ngā āhuatanga e pāna ki te pai, no reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora tātou, my name is Norm Hill. I represent the Tangata Whenua Working Group that has been advancing the cultural, social, holistic wellbeing of a number of projects within the Hamilton area. In this particular case, we are looking at advancing and supporting the aspirations of the project in Horutu, that being Perry's, in regards to restoration of the Māori of the holistic environment, including the cultural, the environmental, the social outputs associated with our people, our river and our whenua. We acknowledge that there is a mechanism that has been on the table for some time, that being the social housing area policy, which is a mechanism to support and fast-track outcomes in terms of social housing for our people. We recognise that there is a need, a huge need in regards to housing, notwithstanding that Māori are statistically represented at the lower end or the high end in terms of the scale of needs for our people, and so we come here today to support the advancement of the SHA policy so as to get the outcomes sooner rather than later for our people. I do want to acknowledge the presence of the Mana Whenua group. Paul did acknowledge Ngāti Warere Tamaunu Po, Ngāti Hawa, Ngāti Mahanga, and also Waikato Tānui are here as well. And essentially we're here to physically galvanise with our partner to support the necessary policies and changes to advance the holistic aspirations of our people. So, nō reira, kei konei tātou ki a ngā whakamua tautoko i ngā āhuatanga o te pai. So we're here to support and galvanise and support, to galvanise and support the aspirations of our people from a holistic wellbeing point of view, so as to restore the mauri of our environment holistically. Kia ora tātou.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. Our last speakers in public forum this morning are Thomas Gibbons and Catherine Wilson, if you'd both like to come forward. Thomas and Catherine are representing Property Council this morning, and they're speaking again to item 9, which is the Special Housing Area Policy Review. Thank you both.
Kia ora koutou, thank you for that welcome. So I'm Thomas Gibbons here representing Property Council New Zealand, the Waikato branch. With me is Catherine Wilson, who's a Senior Advocacy Advisor with our National Office. Property Council, as you probably know, represents commercial, industrial and retail and residential property owners, developers and professional service providers. Housing requires a team effort, central government, local government, private sector, sometimes social sector too. They all have a critical role to play in improving housing supply and housing affordability. Housing obviously being where we live and how we live, an essential part of people's lives. We all know Hamilton's a high growth area, population growing fast. We have all these mechanisms with central government, National Policy Statement on Urban Development Capacity, things like the Housing Accord, which all recognise we are growing fast and need to house people. Property Council believes advancing SHAs in Hamilton will help supply and will help affordability and help house our population more fundamentally. We see SHAs as providing an opportunity to cut through some other processes and help meet a range of needs, different housing typologies, different family structures, different individual choices. We support keeping SHAs moving forward. It's as long ago as December 2016 that the Mayor signed the Hamilton Housing Accord, incorporating Hamilton into the HASHA Act. We had our SHA policy passed in August 2017. First ministerial approval in April for Gibson Place, and now we have a group of SHAs before Council. No doubt more to come in future. Here we're not commenting on any specific development. We're here to support SHAs generally. Again, we have a shortage of housing supply and we need to house our growing population. Increased supply helps keep things affordable. Affordability obviously has its challenges in terms of what needs to be delivered around infrastructure, regulatory costs, development contributions and so on. I'm not going to talk about all those today, just important to note the SHA policy provides for infrastructure to be delivered at no cost to the city. Once approved, these SHAs go to the Minister for further approval. Your role is one step in the process, but a very critical step. We encourage you as an organisation to help advance these SHAs to help address the serious issues of housing supply in Hamilton. Who knows, it could be a member of your family living in one of these houses that gets built one day. Let's help that happen. It's also important that any new or revised SHA policy doesn't just look at imposing restrictions on affordability requirements, but is also enabling, helping development happen and helping houses get built. It's important that you stick with the status quo until there is a clear direction from the Minister. When you have that, absolutely change things, but don't preempt that. Could be a moving target down in Wellington. It's 18 months since the housing accord. Let's hope it's not a further 18 months till these houses get built, and not a further 18 months till we get another tranche of SHA approvals through. We support SHAs generally and support the mechanisms to enhance supply, help the city grow and house its growing population. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for coming down from the city in the north. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll now move to item 5 on page 7. Jen. No, Luke.
No, for those that don't know, this in front of us is Luke Udoa. Yeah, that's right, and he's got a flashy suit now
I
too.
answer to a higher authority at home, Councillor Mallett, so...
Okay, go
under
ahead, please,
instruction.
Luke.
Good morning, Mr Mayor and elected members. Look, I've been asked by Council to come and present this this report in relation to the Rotorua SHA, and look, I propose to take the report as read and just talk through it as a summary and then take any questions that you may have. The first thing I want to note, though, is the resolutions themselves can't be discussed at this particular point because there's some matters in here that relate to the statement of intent, which is in a PX matter. So the order of sequence would be that once I present the report to you and take any questions, that we would then move out of open into PX to talk about the statement of intent, and then come back in after that then to discuss the actual resolutions themselves, because there's a couple of key matters in there around funding matters that do need to be discussed in the PX session of Council. The summary of the report, the executive summary, which is contained on page 8, it really outlines the salient matters that need to be drawn to your attention, and those being that this special housing area, it does satisfy all of the key relevant parts of our policy, the policy that you adopted last year, and the key matters under HASHA. It will add to substantial supply within the city. There is a commitment in the SOI for a level of affordability that Charles is willing to contribute. There is a commitment from Charles as well in relation to key infrastructure matters that I know that are of importance for all of you, as they are for staff members here in Council. The level of commitment to design quality and layout has been exemplary and really goes back to a 3-day intensive design charrette that was done in collaboration between Council staff and Charles last year, that's created a comprehensive master plan and lot layout for the area. And I suppose most importantly that this is strategy consistent in terms of the existing planning framework for Hamilton and some of the wider planning documents that are in place for the Waikato region. So what it does, it really brings online an area that has been structure planned and identified for residential growth in the Rotorua area, and it brings forward a very substantive housing supply pipeline to the city. This matter has been consulted on. The original application was for an area slightly smaller. We went back out and reconsulted with the community at the beginning of this year. The feedback from those matters are addressed in page, I think, 38 of your report. That talks about the feedback that's in there, and I do want to note we've had a late email from one of those submitters, Mr. Peter Murphy, who had intended to come here and speak in public forum but was unable to be here, and he just wanted to reiterate his opposition to the SHA. But the views of all the stakeholders that provided feedback have been taken into account as part of this report. So just in summary, this is a very good project. It's one that's had a reasonable gestation period. The applicants worked very constructively with Council, and the recommendation here is that it does proceed to the Minister for Gazettal, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew, and thanks, Luke, for the report. I took a lovely drive up there yesterday. It's a beautiful piece of land. It's wonderful. It's very exciting. Just could you please address a little bit of the public feedback for me? The Ministry of Education How are discussions going along there, and what are the plans for education in that area, if you can, as general yet specific as you can?
Yeah, HCC and the Ministry of Education have a very good relationship and meet on a regular basis. MOE, their processes around identifying school sites and then moving them into designation are quite protracted. They take quite a long time, but they are fully engaged, not just with the MAR project, but other wider developers in the Rotokawa area. So that there is a strong understanding that they need to provide a school there, and that school and the need for that school was identified in the structure plan about a decade ago.
Right. Yeah.
So they are actively working on looking at identifying a site, but that's about all I could tell you at this particular point. So their interest is really that that the council and Charles Marr and other developers there continue to work and liaise with MOE so they can look to secure a site. But they've got their own quite intensive processes about how they actually get funding internally for asset development. But it is on their radar, and they do know they need to provide a site there.
Right. So I guess my concern is around the fact that it could be built very quickly and beautifully, with a lot of people moving in there. All driving down those little narrow roads to Rotokawa School or the closest schools, which kind of leans me. So you are thinking the school could be some time in coming if there is going to be one up there?
Yeah, look, I think once if this site is gazetted by the Minister and qualifying development consents are submitted and granted and construction is underway, the momentum for securing funding through MOE processes will gather ahead of steam.
Okay. So that kind of leads me on to the transport issue to and from the area, as we discussed, I think, in one of our previous meetings about how well is that being addressed? Because they are little country roads, and I know we've done a lot of good work around Gordonton Road, which is effectively where growth has outstripped our transport, or overdone our transport network. And I see Te Kowhai Road is potentially a similar thing, where it's a rural road right on the boundary, two councils running it, etc. Can you just speak to the mitigation that you've got around the transport to and from the precinct?
Yeah, so and we'll cover some of this off in the statement of intent discussion, the PX matter, but you recall that there was a pretty comprehensive briefing that the General Manager of Infrastructure presented to you back in March on these matters that highlighted some of the transportation issues. Yeah. Those will need to be resolved, and part of that is prior to development occurring, that a comprehensive ITA needs to be developed in conjunction with Council and NZTA around actually providing all of that level of detail around what those transportation improvements look like. We've got some idea around what some of those improvements need to be, because you're right, we've got some issues there. We've got rural roads essentially that will become in an urban area. The level of detail and the funding quantum of that is yet to be determined, and so the SIS sets up that mechanism and the obligation for the developer to pay for that. There might be some upsizing obligations that fall out of that, which has been highlighted in this report and identified in the statement of intent. Yeah. But they are key matters, and they need to be addressed when we get through to a much more of a level of design detail through the process.
And don't get me wrong, I think I'm very excited about this project, but I do see we've got a special housing accord, but we don't necessarily have a special roading accord and a special everything else accord that we need to go with it. So I take it from you that Charles Marr and you guys are working really hard with the authorities to
and look, I suppose just to give you another level of comment, NZTA have submitted on this. They've submitted twice, and they broadly support the project. They've made it really clear they don't want direct access on the State Highway 39, and they'll be a key partner for us, for Council, I should say, to continue to work on these transportation matters.
Okay, thank you. That's cool. Thanks, Luke. Councillor Ryan.
Thanks, Luke. Just on points 15 and 16, you talk about the infrastructure that will service stage 2 will not be funded by Green Seed, will be therefore unfunded growth. But then you go on in 16 to say, Green Seed proposes to fund all infrastructure services to support the development. So I'm just confused as to, it's just stage 1 you're referring to there, or will they be asked to fund stage 2 as well? It's just a little bit unclear for me.
Yeah, so the references to Rotokawa stage 2, Rotokawa is obviously a large development cell. It's been identified in our urban growth strategy for over a decade, and it was split into 2 stages. So the first stage came online about a decade ago and was slightly extended through the district plan review. So when stage one is what was switched on in terms of a zoning, like a live zoning that was funded by council. Stage two was the future urban area, which is what we're referring to in Charles' area. The funding agreement that we're looking to secure with Charles will anything that's directly related to his project, he's paying for. And this is part of the discussion we'll have in the PX session around the SOI, is that there may be opportunities where there's legitimate reasons to increase the size of the infrastructure to help support other urban development, and that's something that's yet to be played out between us and Charles, where the council may need to pay for some of that stuff, but that's something that we need to talk about in PX, and that's the distinction between those two.
Thanks.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Luke. On page 18 of our report, there's a whole lot of water, potable water, wastewater, stormwater, and then it highlights there's a number of things that haven't been done yet that need to be done. And then if we go into page 21, it talks about a statement of intent has been signed, which on how key infrastructure is to be funded. So those things will be addressed in the statement of intent, will they?
Well,
but the statement of intent has already been signed.
Signed by the developer only, and that's why we need to report it to you, so that you give the authority for Richard to execute it at our end. So, so the commitments in the SOI talk about. There's been a level of infrastructure investigation that's been done to date that gives us confidence that we can recommend it.
Yeah.
There are some things in relation to infrastructure that we don't know, and we won't know until we get into a detailed design stage. So if you think of the water stuff, there's been modelling that's been done only up to a certain quantum, but we need to remodel that, and then what comes out of that will give us greater clarity around what the costs are and what the actual infrastructure in relation to water supply looks like. And that's stuff that can only happen when we get into a detailed design, and Charles won't do that until he's got the confidence that he's got a recommendation.
Yeah, okay.
But we're sufficiently confident that in relation to infrastructure, the site can be serviced, you know, and that we can recommend it to the minister. There's just another level of detail we've got to go about where the exact those costs fall and what the ultimate infrastructure solution looks like.
And I appreciate there are all the stages all the way through this, and other things will come up, and some will come before us, some won't. Okay, now that's good. Thank you, Luke.
Just to clarify Luke's answer, Councillor, on the
was he wrong?
Recommendation 2B, look at the second bullet point here, Gary, I think it also page 7.
Yep.
2B, second bullet point, talks about
negotiate with the developer.
A more detailed private developer agreement. So that really just expands on what Luke's saying. So that would come back to council in due course. So that's where the more detailed conversation we've had around infrastructure, I mean, that's captured in a more detailed, much more specific funding agreement.
So the statement of intent is more generic, and then we get more granular, is the term we use around here, and that becomes the private development agreement, which is very specific, is it?
Yes. So if you think the SOI sets out the principles and the key matters that need to be addressed, and gives us the confidence to move.
For example, you will look after all the stormwater.
You're paying for this.
And then the PDA says that means building this. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a child document that is totally consistent with the principles in the statement of intent.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Robb.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thank you for the comprehensive report, Luke. My first question is around paragraphs 94 to 99, which cover off the challenges to the operative district plan, suggesting that there's very little in the way of challenges to the district plan. Is it reasonable to suggest that a good streamlined process could be applied to counter some of the suggestions made during the public forum this morning in terms of getting housing applications through?
Look, my understanding of the comments that were made earlier were reasonably generic. What I can tell you of this particular SHA, and I'll just limit my comments to this one, is that this is an SHA that for an area in the city that has always been identified for residential development. It was brought into the city to meet the growing needs of Hamilton a number of years ago. Went through a comprehensive structure planning process that was fully participatory of the landowners and other stakeholders, lots of investigations, and the result of that was to reserve Rotokauri as a major residential growth cell. Stage 2 just happened to be future urban because at the time the supply situation was very different and the demand situation was different. Equally, there wasn't the funding there to fully urbanise the whole of that cell, similar to Peacock's. This is strategy consistent. There will be a need to revisit some of the planning rules, which has been alluded to in here, and there's a the QDs will come in, but it's fairly aligned with our planning controls.
Right. This question is quite generic because I think it's covered in all of the other applications, and this is around one of the risks, the risk that 40% component might not be achieved in each of the SHAs, and perhaps the question is around this one, but also will apply to the others. If the 40% affordability component is not reached, who bears the risk for that? The council or the developer or anyone else or the government?
Look, I think that's a question that we could revisit in the PX part around the SOI, because there are specific provisions relating to affordability in the SOI.
Happy to hold that over, but it does apply to all of the other ones too, in the sense that it's seen as a risk. And I guess my concern is that we go into the SHA with an expectation that we're going to achieve the government strategy of 40%, our strategy of our policy of 40%.
Look, I think it's important to note that if you collectively, this council recommends that this goes ahead, it gets sent to the minister, and then ultimately the minister has the ability to impose those affordability criteria on the SHA, and it actually goes in the Gazette notice. So once it's locked in the Gazette notice, any qualifying development consent has to give effect to those matters in the consent notice. So if it wasn't able to be achieved, that raises questions about how this council can then possibly approve that project if it doesn't actually meet the Gazette notice.
So then potentially, and again this is generic too across all the others, if council has some responsibility to ensure that the 40% affordability is achieved, are we likely to run the risk that some of these developments could end up being potentially slums or the type of housing that will forever be regarded as low-cost housing, which might in itself attract lower decile people to that particular suburb? You know, do we run the risk of putting prefab type housing in there in order that the developer can get the 40% affordability, and we end up with areas around the city that don't fit within what we might regard as good urban design?
Look, I think the reality is that what the level of an affordable dwelling means in terms of the government policy context is yet to be fully understood. There's some talk around Kiwi Builder what that might mean. I think what that will translate into is a different type of housing product. I don't think it necessarily means it'll be a slum. So I think if it's within the Hamilton context, if you're talking about say $500,000, right, there might be, or slightly less than that, say for example, or it might be a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. Okay, that's a legitimate form of affordable housing and can be designed and built as part of a wider development that can be of high standard and a high quality. So I don't necessarily think that it will result automatically in the connotations of being slum housing. In this instance, this is a master planned project. Charles is doing significant work in Auckland. I think it's in his interest to ensure that whatever affordable component comes out of his development is of a similar standard and quality, so that it fits in with the rest of his project.
Just to add to some of the research we've been doing as we've been working through these SHAs as well as the affordability equation, is what we've probably discovered internationally is it's not always the case that density equals slum. In fact, there are some reasonably upmarket and quality, high density developments in New Zealand as well as offshore, and it's actually an opportunity. And I think in the case of Mar Developments, their taken design is the forefront and still believe they can achieve an affordability criteria. They're aware of where the government's indicating that affordability will be for a 3-bedroom house, or at least indicating it's not a policy position yet, and that's not providing too significant concern for them.
So the other rules within our operative district plan still apply in terms of what the requirements would be for each of the dwellings? We're not giving up those rights that are in the district plan to allow a lower standard of housing to be built?
Well, look, the starting point for a qualified development is it's not assessed under the RMA, it's assessed under the Hasher Act.
Yep, understand that.
And so the priority in terms of the assessment of qualifying developments is different. So the district plan provisions are a matter that have to have regard to. And equally, there's a specific consideration about giving effect to the New Zealand Urban Design Protocol. So that concern around does affordability mean a suboptimal outcome is not a either-or question. They can both be achieved, and that was that's the reason why they've put in that urban design provisions in there to ensure that that's the case.
Okay.
So the provisions for the district plan are matters that can be had regard to as part of any qualifying development application we receive.
Right, thank you. And my final question, infrastructure costs to get this particular development up and running, outside of what we will negotiate in the PDA with the developer, have we got all of those costs included in our current draft long-term plan? There's what I'm asking here, are there any surprise, could there be a surprise of some infrastructure costs that the city might have to fund, not covered by the PDA and or not in our current draft long-term plan?
Blair, you're probably in the best position to respond to that, are you?
The answer is yes, there may be some unbudgeted consequences, and I think that's what that earlier paragraph...
Excuse me, Blair. When you're speaking, can you come up to the microphone for the online listeners?
So yes, there may be some elements that are unbudgeted, Councillor Roll, and I think that's what the comment before was talking about in terms of the clause.
Yep.
So the report does identify that we have the growth funding policy to guide us in terms of the conversations around the upsizing and the additional infrastructure. We don't have that detail at the moment, though.
So we have no indication of what that additional infrastructure cost might be?
Not quantum dollars, no. I think when Chris presented at the briefing, he identified the areas where there may be solutions that council wishes to advance to take advantage of that opportunity, but at this time we don't have those. We're not specific on that. So
could it be millions and millions, or could it be just hundreds of thousands?
I think it depends on individual items. So too early to say, Councillor Roll.
Okay, right. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My questions kind of follow on a little bit. They're very global questions. Of course, at this point in time, we don't really know what the government's final settling point on affordability is, or even Kiwi Build, some of the detail around that, yeah? So, so we need to retain some flexibility, but some opportunity later in the application, well, later in the process, I should say, to ensure that that happens. And you're saying because it comes back to council in the final design and those things may be clearer, that we can have some confidence that we're going to hit the mark. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I am, and that flexibility around affordability is there are some words around that in the SOI, which I can talk to you in the PX session as well.
Yeah, I read that's why I'm kind of... just going to come note to no surprise to anyone who knows me from my previous experience, but I just need to... And the comments that Paul and Aaron made, which were very interesting around pushing the RMA matters further out and getting on with it, and then dealing with the RMA matters, as I understood it, later in the consenting. Yeah, I think that's what... I can't quote them. I think that's what they were saying. But if that is the case, I just have noticing that this particular application is in a very sensitive catchment with Rotakoti and very sensitive waterways, and I think they've done a superb job of starting to think about that. But it, one of the other councillors did note that there are some, I think it was Gary, that there are still some work to do about stormwater and even erosion in the building phase around this sensitive catchment area. Are you suggesting that at a later point we can have comfort that that's dealt with appropriately and sensitively? Or do we have to wait till the detailed design to know how that is going to be dealt with? Or does that get considered?
Yes, and there is a commitment from the developer to work with council on an ICMP, on an integrated catchment management plan, to address specifically those issues. And the ICMP is a tool that council uses to address those matters that have been identified by the regional council through the regional policy statement in relation to matters like water quality and biodiversity.
Yeah, thank you. So that was going to be the second one, as you know, I was going to bring up, is the regional policy statement does make it quite clear that there should be no net loss in biodiversity. That's the standard to achieve. And I do like what the indicative shows about gully and restoration within that development. But those things, I just need to have confidence that if we don't look at them in the first phase, so we can get this cab out of the rank, which is great, but there will be a point when we can assure ourselves that we have met the requirements of the regional policy statement in respect to those natural environment matters.
So I suppose it's important to note that they're addressed in the qualifying development application, but those RPS matters are just matters to have regard to, right? But I think
But you have to give effect to the regional policy statement.
In an RMA context, but this is under HASHA, so it is different. So they had regard to at the QD stage, but I think also the fact that we're doing an ICMP, which is the key implementation tool to deal with biodiversity and water quality, should give you confidence that those matters are certainly not being ignored and are being addressed.
Good, and we'll see how those are dealt with when later in the piece. Okay, that's good to know. I'll probably just say a few comments on that later because it's quite important to me. It's also an important catchment as far as the Waikato Tainui River Plan. So would it be an assumption that, notwithstanding the conversation we had last week in an update, that you might expect a Māori commissioner on this hearing?
Look, there may not be a hearing. I can't.
Might not be.
It depends on once we receive the application and a decision on whether or not there needs to be notification in the hearing. I can't comment on it yet. It's too early.
Okay, thank you. Well, just in terms of the commercial node and neighbourhood centre, really excellent to see that it's part of the thinking up front rather than a sort of later in the piece. We've got no. When would we understand what the time frame that might be? Just picking up on Rob's point slightly around quality of development and trying to avoid some of the issues that we've got ourselves into in the far north of Hamilton here. Is there any indication of what the triggers or timeline, or when would we know when a centre for that, or amenities for the area would be in place?
Look, that could be something we could brought back as a subsequent briefing or an update report on the staging, but the staging and the rollout of that is as you can appreciate, the level of detail associated with that hasn't been developed yet because they don't have a declaration yet. So once they know that, they'll be working with us around what the first cabs off the rank are in terms of qualifying development consents that when they come in, but more than likely it'll be for bulk earthworks and infrastructure and roading. And then we can provide an update to you about what that staging looks like, but we just don't have that information.
So it's important for us to kind of give a steer, though, to developers so they understand the sort of things that will be of interest to council at that later stage?
The commercial elements will probably follow a bit later because they need I suppose a centre of gravity and a catchment to provide, that is going to use those services. So typically it will follow at the later stages of the development.
It's just understanding when that might be, because there might be, as Rob correctly points out, might be some cost to council at that point, but also, in terms of quality design, ensuring that we build a community, not just, we've all talked about this, community around housing, not just housing without a community. Anyway, thank you.
Councillor Dave.
Thanks. And congratulations on the personal disguise, Luke. I nearly didn't recognise you. The issue that was raised by Mark Bunting at the start to do with schools, I want to ask you some questions about that because the history of this council, this area, has been the Ministry of Education has lagged behind almost every other infrastructure provider on a consistent basis. And I recall the 20 years of trying to get a high school in Rotatuna area that this community or communities in North Hamilton had. I know there's a high school slated for this area in the structure plan, and 2 primary schools, not just one. Seems to me that the addition of 4,000 people here is a half a high school and a whole primary school needed. What sort of negotiations, discussion are we having with the Ministry of Education? I don't just mean the local people that we have a good relationship with, because they don't hold the budgets or make decisions like that. I mean the people in, are the Ministry of Education of Wellington in sync with the special housing area needs of a big SHA like this?
My understanding is that senior people in Wellington are aware of it. So when typically what happens is when these types of large planning processes, they come up on the radar and they're picked up by various consultants on behalf of MOE, and those people feed that information through to their network asset development teams in Wellington, which then provide the impetus to provide the comments about whether or not they support or don't support these projects. So I can only tell you that they are aware of it. I haven't been involved in any detailed negotiations or discussions with anyone in Wellington. I'm not aware of anyone else from council having those discussions with anyone at a Wellington scale. We have had a number of discussions with the local team here, but it's been pretty high level.
Yeah. Do you think it would be a good idea for the council to lead some discussions about that with even as high as the Minister of Education about those future needs? Because we can't just say we want a school next year. It takes some years.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I think there's always value in elected members and senior staff engaging with Wellington on these matters.
Thanks. Just going on to transport issues, Blair has mentioned to us, and he might come in on this, but that there's a possibility, I think he described it as, that there'll be infrastructure needs over and above what's provided for in the PDA, or would be likely to be provided for in the PDA. In other words, ones that the current ratepayers would have to, at that time, would have to fund. Have we had any discussions with Greenseed, Charles Marr, about them, if they are the cause of them having to be brought forward in time compared with our 30-year infrastructure plan? Have we had any discussions about them advance funding it to be reimbursed at the time that the build otherwise would have happened?
Councillor McPherson, I think that they're good questions. I think they're ones that we can have in the PX session in relation to the SOI.
Okay. Well, but I'm just talking about the principle of...
Yes, in principle we have had those discussions, but we can probably talk to some detail on that in the PX session about the SOI.
I'm more concerned with the policy of growth funding growth, and if we end up, and Councillor Pascoe asked us sort of questions about this, if we have to pay extra because of the growth, is that something being addressed up front, and funding mechanisms being sought for that don't put pressure on the rest of the city?
They have been the subject of extensive discussions with Charles, but I think we can elaborate on that in PX.
Sure. Specifically on one transport connection there, because this is a little different from other SHAs which are plonked in the middle of the city or in the middle of existing development areas. This has actually got a gap, farmland between it and the rest of the city, and will have for a while. Transport connections become quite important, and I know there's been questions asked about the nature of the dangerous country roads we've got, which have 80k speed limits on them, and if you went 80k around some of those corners, you'd go off the road. Probably even on a bicycle, you'd go off at about 40k's. But that aside, there's one specific link which is mentioned in paragraph 118 of the report, the Te Road link, I think it's called, potentially going underneath the expressway, which links it back into the base area. I mean, how much discussion has been had on that link? Because that's the most direct link back to Hamilton, short of building a whole new road out there.
Once again, it's been something that's been raised at a high level, and it's that level of detail through the comprehensive ITA that's identified in the SOI and then the subsequent PDA discussions.
Okay, but any conclusions? Because the report's not showing any conclusions.
Not at this stage.
Okay. What about public transport links and cycling links with the city, particularly public transport? It's expensive to provide that when a suburb's only half built, and we've had a preference in this council to have PT buses into a suburb as early as possible, not when everyone's been there and filled up the suburb and decided to have 3 cars in their garage and that sort of thing. We want to get the option, the choice in there early. That would involve significantly more funding than for a normal bus service. Has there been any discussion with Greenseed about that issue?
Yeah, we have identified that that's a matter, and it is referred to in paragraph 115, that there needs to be on further consultation with Waikato Regional Council about public transport networks once that community is up and running, and mainly that's in relation to to what bus services might look like.
It's not once the community's up and running though, is it? Isn't it when the community starts forming? Isn't that the trigger?
Yes, but in terms of getting me giving you any surety about what that looks like at this stage, we don't have that at this point, other than noting that it's something that needs to be addressed in more detail through the ITA and ongoing discussion for the Regional Council.
Yeah. And things like the outcomes like that, even if they include other councils like the Regional Council, would be in the PDA that comes at some stage?
Yes, that's something that can be addressed in the PDA, but as I said, the PDA hasn't been developed at this point, but it's something that we can certainly follow up with the Regional Council and Charles for exploration.
Wouldn't a private developer agreement that sort of puts all the nuts and bolts, or shows all the I's dotted and T's crossed for transport and other infrastructure, wouldn't that be an absolute requirement to be in the private developer agreement?
It is, and the SOI talks about the need to do a full integrated transport assessment. So that is something that is a condition of the statement of intent.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, Dave. Can I just clarify as well? I think the matters that you're talking about, which are on the report in paragraphs 111 through to 118, if we also look at the SOI, which is in PX, but the SOI raises the same issues, including such as the road you're talking about in terms of the Te Kowhai link under the expressway. So that's in the SOI. I guess what the team are balancing here is spending more time to finalise a detailed PDA and taking the time, which will be considerable to work on that, as opposed to capturing all the principles in the SOI, which clearly identifies that we believe there's considerable cost that MAR needs to meet here, and these issues that we need to finalise, and also identifying that until that PDA is signed and agreed, no qualifying development can actually be completed and lodged. I guess we're trying to give Council every protection for the issues that you're raising. So we're acknowledging that there are substantial transport issues to be addressed. Some of those we can't quantify yet, some of those the conversations haven't been completed, but we have clearly documented that these are issues, are in the SOI, and Charles Marr is agreeing to those in terms of either completely addressing those issues or identifying that we have to have further conversations around those issues, and the ones that you're raising are exactly the ones that we've identified.
Okay.
So it's that balance between speed and perfection now.
I want to make sure, I guess, 2 things. One, that they're not forgotten, so you've covered that. But 2, that they are not an extra cost to the council unless we agree otherwise.
And I think that's the key point, that ultimately the detailed private development agreement will come back to this table for council to approve.
I was going to ask that.
And so any qualifying development will not proceed until the PDA has been agreed by this council. And so ultimately this council is unhappy with where those infrastructure costs are lying, and or the level of service or compromises that council may be having to agree to. You could say, no, we're not going any further, and this development proposal would stop. So that is the protection for council. So I think what the team are trying to do here is to promote a SHA to the minister, which the team are believing is a really great proposal, acknowledging that there is some more detail to be finalised in terms of infrastructure.
Is one of the issues on the list to be sorted out the safety of the exits onto State Highway 39? Because I have in mind the problem of Thomas Road and Gordonton Road, and the indicative designs have seen that at least one of the exits will look exactly like that and work probably exactly like that if we don't prepare in advance for it. That's the, I was talking about the one in the middle of Green Seeds development where it hits State Highway 39, but also possibly the one down the west end of it on the corner of Exelby or Burbush or whatever it's called.
Sorry, just bear with me, Councillor McPherson, while I go back to the
See, I can envisage a nice, well-constructed T-junction with the highway there and heaps of crashes. So I'm not saying give me the answer there, I'm saying can we get it on the list if it's not?
It is addressed.
Yep.
Chris?
Yeah, so I'm just going to jump in and certainly it will be addressed, Councillor.
Thank you.
So, and I think the statement of intent sets up that discussion, and it also sets up the PT discussions. So it's all in there and it will all be covered by the time it comes back to the PDA.
Thanks. The last thing in terms of the speed of this whole thing, a lot of these discussions will take a while. Will we be continuing them while if we pass this today, send it off to the Minister for approval, which might take a few weeks? Last time it took a few weeks anyway, quite a few weeks. Will we be continuing the discussion so that we're not wasting time holding fire, waiting for the Minister? Yeah, good. Thanks.
Councillor Angela.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. Just a quick question first for the CE. When we started this process, I asked you if you felt we had enough resources to be able to move quickly under the Act, and I heard some comments from the public forum today around Tauranga is moving a little bit faster than us. So is that question still relevant? Are you still confident you have enough resources to move quickly in this space?
Yep, we do. We have the reason that the process has taken longer than Tauranga is a completely different environment in Tauranga, in a completely different scenario with a different district plan. So that's one reason. From a resource point of view, and where we're at with this one, there's been some really in-depth and very positive negotiations, discussions with the developer to this point. And as we've worked through those, it's taken time to agree. And it's not a resource issue that's caused that.
Okay, great, thank you. Just one question, Luke, on page 9. Now, under our policy, it does say that if a proposal is accepted in principle, council will enter into negotiations. And I heard Blair talk about this is sort of a choice for this application between speed and perfection. Are there any risks to slowing things down by not sending everything off to the Minister at the moment?
I don't think there's any risk at this point. I think in terms of the intention of HASHA, the intention of the SHA process is a different process from a plan change under the RMA. We've got sufficient information here that we're confident that this thing can be gazetted, and we've got the safeguards in place to give the confidence to Charles as the developer to continue on the detailed investigations that are needed for us to understand what the funding situation looks like and some of those detailed design matters. So I think we've struck a good balance between those two sort of competing forces.
Because under our policy it indicates that that everything will go, including the development agreement, to the Minister. So have we, since we're not doing that, but we are able to do that, have we let the Minister's office know? What I'm concerned about is if the Minister's office looks at it, and Councillor McPherson raised the issue around, look, that might take some time, but then they sort of give it back to us, and we've got to give it all back to them.
So the statement
all over again with a development agreement.
The statement of intent is the mechanism by which the Minister can be satisfied that the questions around infrastructure have been addressed. That's the matter we'll talk about in PX, but all the other matters in terms of what the ministerial advisors and the team at MIMBI will look at, which is in terms of its meeting the requirements of the Act, how it addresses our policy, the questions around infrastructure, that package is enough there for them.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Leo.
Question. Reading the profile of the developer, Charles, I noticed that he's already completed 1.7 billion worth of dollars in housing, and currently he's got 2.9 million under construction, his proposal. And in Auckland alone, he's doing 8,000 to 10,000 houses at the present time. You're pretty confident that he can complete this?
Yes.
Big money.
Yeah. No, he's got track record and has been one of the major landowners developing Drury South in Auckland. It's a major growth node there. The level of spend that he has committed to date is not insignificant. The way in which he's wanted to work and engage with us, and the level of expertise he's brought to the table in terms of his consultant team suggests to me that he's very determined to deliver the housing that's been identified in his application.
Okay, Luke, is it your recommendation that we go into PX now?
That's my recommendation, Mickey.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll move that we go into PX. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Mark. Okay, so we'll, after this PX, we'll go straight into a morning tea break. So just for the sake of the public and the media, I would say you've got until we won't start again after PX. How long do you need in PX? Are you thinking?
Depends on questions, but I mean, I would have thought if we allocate 20 minutes, that should be sufficient.
20 minutes. So we won't be back until before. We won't be back until before 11:15, just for the sake of those who are waiting or going out for a cup of tea. So, okay. So all those for. Any against? Carried.